Is only in Kenya ambao utapata watu wanasema boxing inaharibu akili. Mbona usiseme mtu kama Pacquiao ama Mayweather ataribika akili? Unaona?
Boxing is a combat sport in which two people, usually wearing protective gear, throw punches at each other for a predetermined amount of time, usually in a boxing ring. It's an ancient sport with the earliest evidence of boxing rules dating back to ancient Greece. In Kenya, boxing is a sport that's surrounded by a lot of myths and stereotypes, something that most of the boxers are aware of.
Is only in Kenya ambao utapata watu wanasema boxing inaharibu akili. Mbona usiseme mtu kama Pacquiao ama Mayweather ataribika akili? Unaona? So hapa Kenya inafaa tuanze encourage young tangs waanze kupenda huu mchezo. Huu ni mchezo tu kama wengine, kama vile football, mbio, ni mchezo. Nafikiri hata unaweza pata mtu wa mbio ameharibika akili. Utasema mbio imemharibika akili. Ugonjwa ya akili inaweza shika mtu yote. Si lazima boxing peke yake. Boxing tu ni inakuanga tu sababu.
That was an interview I conducted with the professional boxer Rayton Okwiri in 2019. This year, during the International Boxing Day, I spoke with some of the upcoming boxers and they still hear the same things.
Because boxing, sijui hata ukipigwa utakuwa hivi, sijui ukipigwa utakuwa chizi, lakini vitu kaa hii hakunanga.
Vitu nimesikia mingi sana. Unasikia kucheza boxing una chizi, kupigwa. Boxing ni sport poa. Wale watu kitambo wanasema kucheza boxing utachizi. But mimi naweza sema boxing ni poa. Inasaidia msee self discipline unakuwa nayo. Kama before nianze boxing nilikuwa mtu mwingine arrogant sana.
Fear zenye watu wako nayo kuhusu boxing. Watu wengi wanadhani ukicheza boxing sana utakuwa mwenda wazimu. Alafu pia si kila mtu anataka kupigwa. Mara mingi watu ukiangalia huko nyumbani watu wakipigwa, hakuna mtu anataka kugongwa kichwa. Na in boxing lazima upigwe kichwa, upigwe mbavu. The more you train na pia ukifanya sparring sana, utaweza kujua jinsi ya kuipa punch, kuona punch venye inakuja. Kuna defense boxing, kuna style zenye unafaa kujidefend nazo na ni mingi. So ukiwa boxer mzuri utaweza kutumia hizo tactics zenye umefundishwa na makocha wako kujidefend. At least usiweze kumalizia boxing kuwa na injury.
Apart from developing mental illnesses, some people still believe that boxers abuse drugs.
Watu wengi wanadhania boxers wengi wanavuta bangi. Hiyo ni ukweli, sitadanganyana. Mimi mwenyewe nimecheza boxing almost more than 20 years, sijawahi vuta bangi. Kitu unafanya boxers, unaona hata viatu kivaa ukiwa unakanyaga na inaisha soul. Sasa unaona kichwa watu wana punch, hiyo punch boxers huwa wanakuwa affected na punch. Sasa hiyo punch ikiaffect watu wana confuse hii watu ni waba, lakini ni zile punch drunk, zile punches ndio zimewakamata, imewashikashika. Unajua hata zamani boxing ya zamani watu wako wanavaa headgear, hizi zimekuja saa hizi. Hata mimi nikianza boxing hatukuwa tunavaa kitu kwa kichwa. Ulikuwa unacheza tu hivyo tu. Tena gloves za zamani zilikuwa za makonge, sio kama hii saa hizi za sponge. Ndio unaona siku hizi boxing ni tofauti ile ya zamani, tactics pia imegeuka. Unaona hata kama Olympics scoring ulikuwa unaona vile inakuwa. Ukipatikana ngumi tu hata kama hujaanguka chini, referee anastopisha. Si ati mpaka uanguke chini. Bora punch imekukamata. Sasa hiyo misconception ya punch drunk ndio watu wana confuse naye, boxers ni wabangi, boxers ni wanafanya hivi. Hapana, ile punch drunk tu.
So, does boxing really cause mental illnesses? I spoke to Silas Kirinya, one of the leading counseling psychologists in Kenya.
Boxing does not cause directly mental illnesses. It's important to note that. However, as a boxer, there are many other factors that actually can predispose you to mental illnesses. For example, if you have an injury of the brain, what we call the chronic brain trauma. So if that is what you experience as you're fighting or you're boxing, then that actually can lead to other things. Like, for example, we have seen boxers, especially those that have been really quite prominent. Some of them have had maybe mental illnesses like depression, bipolar disorder. Others have had Parkinson's disease. Others will die of Alzheimer and other mental illnesses. So we have seen that happening. And according to the research that has been done, actually they get affected because of the fight, and so sometimes they have a brain injury, and that impacts them in that way. But also there are other factors, like for example the form of pressure that they go through. If you're working, for example, in a club, So it means then there is a club owner, there is probably donors, there are fans, they are part of the team that you're playing for, and of course there's yourself, your friends, your family, and so all this pressure come on you and they want you to win. And so the focus of boxing actually becomes almost like winning, and that's all. And so the thought of I can lose, or those many moments where you lose, then the pressure is too much, and that alone can predispose you to a lot of other mental illnesses.
We've witnessed some of the leading boxers in the country and abroad developing some mental illnesses, either in the course of their career or after they retire. So what could be some of the causes to these illnesses that affect some boxers and celebrities in general?
So when you are a celebrity, or when you're a boxer, or when you are so good in what you do and you become like a star in the society, then people stop looking at you as a human being. You actually become a super person, and therefore you don't fall in the category of other people. That means then you have a perfect body, you have money, you have fame, like you have all you need in life. You kind of have everything figured out. But then the challenge is, these are human beings like everybody else. So whatever it is that is impacting other human beings, they are actually impacting them as well. But also the mistake that most of the celebrities do is that they try to identify themselves according to their fame, according to their body, according to the money they have. And if that is the case, then it means that day when your body will not be the same way, that day when you will have, the fans do not look at you the same, that day someone else will come who is more star than you are, then it means at that point you will lose your identity. And when you lose your identity, it means you have lost your whole self, and therefore you enter into crisis. And the crisis of identity will lead to the mental crisis, and mental crisis will lead to mental illnesses. And so that's why you realize that most celebrities, when they actually move from the stage, you realize they will start grappling with a bit of mental issues here and there. And so it's important to realize that your identity is not dependent on what you have, but on who you really are. So that even as you ascend the ladder of fame, you actually remain who you are, humble, simple, a human being like everybody else. And once you realize that, it's easier for you to be able to overcome those pressures that come your way. But also it's important to be realistic that at times you can win, you can lose. And that's a reality of life, because there are things that you're not in control of, and there are things that you can control. The moment you understand the things you can control, then you go ahead and control them. But the moment you realize there are other things that you cannot control in your life, then you don't try even to control them. Because the moment you try, you throw yourself into a helplessness kind of a state, because there is no way you can control those situations. For example, about winning, you can only rely so much on your practice, you can rely on your skills, and you can rely probably on your confidence and your motivation, but actually you may not be able to determine, just by the fact that you're motivated, you have practice, you will not determine whether you win or not, because also that will depend on how your opponent is going to play. So if your opponent plays better than you, then it means you lose. And therefore, if you're open to losing and winning, then that becomes a very good kind of mental state that enables you to grapple or to go through the event of losing without actually losing yourself in the process. As sportsmen and celebrities, I would encourage you, one of the things that you can do, which is very, very, very clear, is know actually who you are, not what you have, such that what you have can be taken away from you, but you remain who you are. Number two is always to try as much as you can. The moment you notice you're grappling with some mental issues, it could be too much stress, anxiety, panic attacks, or sometimes you're demotivated, you feel burnout, reach out, talk to someone for your support. Maybe you can talk to a therapist, you can talk to your coach, you can talk to your colleague. They will be able to support you and encourage you, so that ultimately once you get helped, then you're able to move on with your career. The other thing also, do not try to cope in a maladaptive way or in a negative way, because sometimes you realize that you can't keep up with the pressure. Then at times you decide, you say, let me go and drink, let me use this substance. If you do that, then actually you are causing more pressure, because under substance use you may not be able to perform as much, you may not be able to practice as much. So it's important to consider those abilities, those skills. Something else that I can also encourage the sports people is exercises that you do already is therapy by itself. So if you can do it sometimes not just for winning, but just to enjoy, that is still another way actually of being able to work around the mental health. Because what happens when you exercise is your mind moves from that constant stressor or stressful moment or event, and you focus on something that is exciting you, something that is building you up, something that's motivating you, and that alone becomes an antidote to quite a lot of other mental illnesses. And of course, at the end of it all, to actually admit that you're a human being like everybody else, you can have a broken relationship, you can lose someone who is very close to you, and so when these things happen to you, then you don't have to look down on yourself. Feel motivated and know that you're still a human being like everybody else. My parting shot in this case, I will say that mental health is something big, and we really need to focus on it as a society. That there are so many people who are going through mental struggles, but not all of them are supposed actually to go all the way to a point where they get hospitalized, or where they get to a rehabilitation center, or where someone loses it to a point that we say they have gone nuts. We don't have to let people get there. Some cases, we only need to talk to someone and actually they will get to a better place. Some other times is to listen to them, not even to say anything. Or some other times to understand their situation without judging them. Otherwise, as a celebrity, most people, they are likely to judge you. But also the other thing that I see with celebrities is you have maybe social media accounts. And of course you win a game and everybody is putting all manner of positive comments there. But then someone who, for whatever reason, they don't like you, they don't like your color, they don't like your body, they will write a very bad comment. And so when you go through that and you see the comment, that can break you down. And you forget actually there were 1,000 positive comments about you, and you focus on this negative comment. This often happens because all along you want to be a super person. So if you can remove that kind of mindset, then you'll be at a good place and you will enjoy life.